All right, so today we're tackling a giant of a book, one you've definitely heard of, Moby-Dick. But here's the twist. We're not going to talk about it as this untouchable masterpiece. Nope, we're going to look at it as maybe the greatest failure in American literature.
You see, when this thing first came out, it just completely sank. I mean, critics hated it. The public totally ignored it. It sold so badly that some libraries literally didn't know what to do with it. Get this, they'd sometimes just stick it in the marine biology section. Can you imagine? It was a complete and utter disaster.
And what about the author Herman Melville? Well, he died in 1891, in total obscurity. His death barely made a ripple. The man we now think of as a titan of American literature? He was buried with just his wife and daughters there, a forgotten man who wrote a book the world had already forgotten.
So that's the big question, right? How on earth did this colossal failure, a book that pretty much destroyed its author's career, somehow claw its way back from the depths to become the timeless classic we all know today? It's a heck of a story. Let's get into it. First things first, to really get this book, you've got to understand the man behind it. And Herman Melville's life was, well, it was absolutely wild. I'm not kidding. This guy wasn't just some writer sitting in a dusty room. He was a full-blown world-class adventurer. His real life reads crazier than most fiction.
Just look at this timeline. The drama here is off the charts. Melville starts out in a prominent family, but they go bankrupt. So what does he do? He hits the sea. First as a regular sailor, then he joins a whaling ship for years. It was so brutal, he actually jumped ship and went to live with a tribe in the South Pacific, a tribe known for cannibalism. He managed to get out of that too and used these insane adventures to write his first books, which were actually big hits. But then came Moby-Dick. He poured everything he had, all his experiences, all his deep thoughts into this one book, and his career just slammed to a halt. Total failure.
Okay, so to really grasp Moby-Dick, you have to get this. Back in the 19th century, whaling wasn't just some romantic adventure. Not at all. It was a massive global industry. And the whale, it wasn't just an animal. It was basically a swimming barrel of cash, one of the most valuable resources on the entire planet. And the star of this whole industry? The sperm whale. So, about that name. It's a little awkward, but here's the story. Whalers discovered this huge reservoir in the whale's head, filled with this waxy, oily liquid. They thought it was, well, sperm, and the name just stuck. That stuff was actually called spermaceti, and it was worth a fortune. And let's talk about size for a second. We're talking about an absolutely colossal animal. A big male could be 30 meters long. That's almost 100 feet. Hunting one of these things wasn't just a job. It was like going to war with a living, breathing submarine. So yeah, this was huge business. I want you to picture a single sperm whale as a floating treasure chest. Its blubber, that got turned into oil that lit up lamps in cities all over the world. That spermaceti stuff from its head, that made the absolute best, cleanest burning candles and was used in cosmetics. And if you got really lucky, you might find something called ambergris in its gut, a super rare substance that was and still is a key ingredient in high-end perfumes. The payday was so massive that ships would literally spend 3 or 4 years at a time just hunting them down. Here's a fun little detour that Melville actually gets into in the book. There was a real debate back then about whether a whale was a fish or a mammal. Now, we know scientifically it's a mammal, no question. But Melville argues it's a fish. Why would he do that? Well, there was a very practical reason. If it's a fish, then devout Christians could eat it during times like Lent when meat was off limits. It was a clever little loophole with real money and culture behind it. All right, so let's recap. We've got this epic book, written by a total adventurer, about a hugely important global industry, so why did it fail so spectacularly? The short answer, the world just wasn't ready for it. But don't worry, the story of how it came back to life is just as wild. Yeah, the road to becoming a classic was long and pretty lonely. After the book bombed in 1851, Melville's career just fizzled out. A few years later, he quit writing altogether and got a quiet desk job as a customs inspector. He did that for 19 years. He died in 1891, and almost nobody noticed. It took until the 1920s, a whole 30 years after he died, for a new generation of critics to dig up his work and realize what they'd found, pulling Moby-Dick back from the dead. And wow, what a comeback. Today, if you talk about the fathers of 19th century American literature, there are 3 main guys: Edgar Allan Poe, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and Herman Melville. He's right up there with them. Think about that. To go from a complete nobody to a cornerstone of American literature, that's an absolutely incredible reversal of fortune. So, why didn't anyone see his genius at the time? I think this quote from Schopenhauer, one of Melville's favorite thinkers, just nails it. Melville wasn't writing for his audience in the 1850s. He was wrestling with huge, complex ideas, obsession, humanity versus nature, the meaning of it all, that people just weren't ready for. He was, in a way, writing for us. He was writing for the future, and that made him a complete alien in his own time.
But this whole story of late in life or really afterlife fame has a really tragic side to it. The darkness and the depth that make Moby-Dick so powerful, a lot of that was a direct reflection of the incredible suffering in Melville's own life.
I mean, forget the bankruptcy and the career disappointment for a second. His personal life was just heartbreaking. He outlived both of his sons. His oldest, Malcolm, died by suicide when he was only 18. His second son, Stanwix, also died way too young. So Melville dealt with poverty, being ignored professionally, and just unimaginable loss in his own family. When you know that, it's almost impossible not to see the shadows of his own pain in Captain Ahab's dark, obsessive, and tragic quest.
And all of this leaves us with one last big question to chew on. Herman Melville's life is this powerful, stark reminder that creating something truly timeless can come at a devastating personal cost. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is great suffering what it takes to create great art?
Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we are diving deep, really deep into one of the absolute titans of world literature, Herman Melville's Moby-Dick. We're going to get into this obsessive voyage and try to figure out just what makes this massive 19th century whaling story still feel so important.
And it all kicks off with what might be the most famous opening line in all of fiction. Call me Ishmael. It sounds so simple, right? Just a direct invitation. But believe me, it's so much more than that. This is us meeting our narrator, the only person who's going to guide us through the absolute chaos that's about to unfold.
So that's the big question, isn't it? Why does this huge old book about whaling still hit so hard? To even begin to answer that, we've got to do what the book asks us to do. We have to join Ishmael on this fateful voyage aboard the whaling ship, the Pequod. And this isn't just any trip. It starts out as an escape from the world, from land, but it ends up confronting the very nature of existence. No big deal, right?
Okay, so first up, call me Ishmael, the outcast's escape. Let's really get to know our guide here, because Ishmael's way more than just the guy telling the story. His name, his whole reason for going to sea, it sets the stage for everything.
So that name, Ishmael, that's our first huge clue. If you know your Bible, Ishmael is the son of Abraham, who gets cast out, sent into the wilderness. He's the original wanderer, the ultimate exile. So by picking this name, our narrator is basically screaming at us from page 1. Hey, I'm a guy who just doesn't fit in. I don't belong on solid ground anymore. And why is he leaving? I mean, what's his motivation? Well, he puts it beautifully. He's got a damp, drizzly November in his soul. What a line, right? Basically, he's broke. He's deeply depressed, and he has this powerful, overwhelming urge to just escape the so-called civilized world. For him, the sea is the only cure. It's his escape hatch. And this decision really sets up the core tension of the whole book. You've got the land on one side, that's society, rules, stability, but also confinement. And then you have the sea. That's chaos, the great unknown, and this wild, maybe even terrifying kind of freedom. And guess which one Ishmael chooses? Yeah, he dives headfirst into the chaos. All right, next section, the ship of the world, a microcosm of humanity. So Ishmael gets his wish. He signs onto a whaling ship, the Pequod. But you gotta understand, this ship, it's so much more than just a ship. Because once he gets on board, he finds himself in what he calls a floating exhibition of races. I mean, look at this crew. You've got Americans, Africans, Chinese, South Pacific Islanders, indigenous peoples. It's literally the whole world crammed onto one ship, a true microcosm of humanity, all thrown together far away from the laws of any country. And it gets darker.
Even the name of the ship, the Pequod, is a warning. It's named after the Pequot, a Native American tribe that was, well, annihilated by colonists. So by naming the ship that, Melville is dropping a massive hint. This voyage isn't just some grand adventure. Oh no, it's tied directly to the darker side of America, to its history of conquest and destruction. There's a shadow over this journey from the very start.
But it's here, on this floating world, that something amazing happens. Ishmael, the outcast from so-called civilized society, forms this incredibly deep bond with Queequeg. Now, Queequeg is a harpooner, a tribal prince, and a cannibal. He's everything Ishmael's world would label a savage, and yet they become inseparable. Their friendship just shatters all the prejudices of the time. And this bond is literally what saves Ishmael's life. Okay, so we've got this incredible, diverse crew, but every ship has a captain. And this one? Well, he's a whole other story. Let's talk about Captain Ahab's vengeance, the tyrant's quest. At first, he's just this mystery, a man who stays hidden in his cabin, like a terrifying secret at the heart of the ship. And then he appears. And his entrance is just wow. Captain Ahab finally comes on deck, and his appearance is absolutely shocking. He's got this jagged white scar running down his face, looks like he was struck by lightning. And he's standing on a prosthetic leg, a leg carved from the jawbone of a sperm whale. I mean, his own body is a testament to some kind of terrible, violent struggle with the natural world. It doesn't take long for him to gather the whole crew, and that's when he reveals the real mission, the secret purpose of this entire voyage. This is not about hunting whales for oil, not about making money. No. He dramatically nails a gold coin to the ship's mast and says it's a reward for whoever first spots one specific whale, a legendary white whale they call Moby-Dick. This isn't business. This is a quest for revenge. And boom, just like that, you have the central human conflict of the entire book. On one side, you have Captain Ahab, driven by this all-consuming, vengeful obsession. On the other, you have his first mate, Starbuck, the voice of cautious reason and moral duty. Starbuck is like, wait a minute, seeking revenge on an animal? That's insane. It's blasphemy. But Ahab's will is just so powerful, so hypnotic. He sweeps the crew up in his madness, and they all sign on to his quest. So this brings us to the whale itself. The whiteness of the whale, an unknowable symbol. What is it about this one whale? Why does Moby-Dick drive Ahab into such a fanatical, world-ending rage? Well, the book actually pumps the brakes on the plot for a bit to dive right into that question. So, really, what does Moby-Dick, the white whale, represent? This is the absolute core mystery of the novel. And to get at it, Melville does something brilliant. He starts by just analyzing the color white. Yeah, think about it. Usually we think of white as the color of purity, divinity, good things. But Melville turns that completely on its head. He argues that the deepest quality of white is actually horror. He makes you think of the ghastly white of a shark's belly or a ghost or a blizzard. White becomes the color of death, a terrifying blankness, a void that suggests maybe the universe is totally empty and meaningless. It's a heavy idea. So, with that in mind, the white whale becomes this giant, swimming, unknowable symbol. What is he? Is he the power of God? Is he just brutal, indifferent nature? Is he the literal devil, the embodiment of evil? Or maybe, and this is the big one, maybe he's just a blank canvas, a screen onto which Ahab and the crew, and yeah, even us, the readers, project all of our deepest fears and obsessions. Okay, here we go. The final, fatal chase, the inevitable catastrophe. After all of this searching, the Pequod finally finds him. They find Moby-Dick in the middle of the vast Pacific. And what happens next? It's not a hunt. It's an apocalyptic 3-day war between one man and the entire natural world. This climax is just this brutal, drawn-out battle. Day 1, they spot him, they attack, and Moby-Dick immediately turns the tables and completely destroys Ahab's boat. Day 2, they go after him again, and the whale fights back, tangling the lines, smashing more boats, and even damaging the Pequod itself. You realize pretty quick, this isn't just an animal fighting for its life. It feels like it's fighting with strategy, with real malice. And then comes day 3, the final, terrible end. Ahab, in a final act of defiance, throws his last harpoon. It hits. But the rope whips around his own neck and yanks him out of the boat, pulling him to his death, literally tied to the object of his obsession. But the whale isn't done. Enraged, Moby-Dick turns and rams the Pequod, head on. The ship goes down, pulling the entire crew with it into a swirling vortex. All gone. The entire crew, the ship, Ahab, everything is lost. Well, almost everything. There is one survivor, our narrator, Ishmael. He was thrown clear of the wreckage, and he survives how? By clinging to a coffin. Not just any coffin. It's the one his friend Queequeg had built for himself when he thought he was going to die. You can't make this up. In this perfect, poetic twist, the very symbol of his friend's death becomes the thing that saves his life. It's friendship, not obsession, that allows him to float away.
And so that brings us back to the great, haunting question that the book leaves us with. What do we make of Ahab's quest? Is this a tragic, almost noble story about humanity's struggle against a cold, unbeatable universe? Or is it something else entirely? A terrifying warning about how easily our own obsessions can destroy, not just us, but everyone around us. The fact that there's no easy answer, the fact that we're still wrestling with that question today, well, that's what makes Moby-Dick a true epic. And that's why it continues to haunt us.